Is everyone having a fabulous time, or is it too soon in the proceedings to have decided? Panels all morning, yeah? Okay. You guys should huddle in the middle here or something, get cozy.
Yeah, this is an awkward room.
Doubly awkward because it's all been filmed and we have to be really interesting and you have to be interesting back. So what I know that normally in panels we end up with questions and stuff at the end, but I was rather, a lot of panels I've been on lately, I've been trying to say, ask questions as we go. You know, if there's a particular topic that we're discussing and you agree or disagree, please ask us questions as we go. We don't have a lot of time, so trying to keep time at the end is not always easy. And if you're going to be asking questions, there'll be a volunteer in the room with a microphone, again, as this has all been recorded, and then we can also hear, or the rest of the audience can hear what you're saying. All right, so I want to have a very quick overview, and then after the quick overview, everyone on the panel can introduce themselves. I'm Dave Allen, most widely known as the founding member and bass player of Gang of Four. I won't get into my background, I'm all over the web, so I'm sure you can dig in and find enough about me there. Co-moderator today, David Ewald, really good friend of mine. We've worked closely together in the past, and we both live up there in Portland, Oregon, and spend time worrying about the sort of stuff we're going to talk about today. I want to get into, very quickly, this overview. This is not meant to be a panel that's sort of overly critical of music technologies particularly, or even what music streaming services particularly are doing. So I thought I'd do a quick overview to sort of try and set the stage for the kind of discussion we're going to have. Really, and these are just bullet points, so I'll be pretty brief. It dawned on me flying down yesterday on the plane that basically, having looked at all the tweet streams that were coming out of the digital conference side, you know, it's bubble world. We're living in a bubble, and I was kind of flying into a bubble. And I noticed some events, particularly this week, which were a little worrisome. Mainly on the sort of internet, social media, and digital music and advertising side. You may have heard about how an advertising agency, I don't need to name them, but if you've been following along, that they decided it would be a great idea to outfit some homeless people with t-shirts and wireless hotspots. So you can think about that. There was a chat Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins had with Brian Solis, a social media expert, that was just really weird. I couldn't quite get my head around what they were trying to achieve, but it seemed like an angry ex-rock star railing against the internet whilst trying to embrace the internet. You know, I'd love to have been on that panel. And they happened during the interactive side. Then we saw that Turntable.fm managed to strike a deal this week with all the major labels, so everyone can now play happily on Facebook because it's all legal, so have fun. We'll get into what that means as we go. But one thing that I saw in the press release that was quite interesting was a quote from Bill Campbell, a senior vice president at Universal, talking about the Turntable FM deal. Once you start to gamify music discovery, that's when you start to really understand what social engagement and loyalty comes down to. It's an interesting sort of statement. I don't quite understand it, but I think there's enough brains on the panel to help me get there. And what that comes down to is sort of language and terminology. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but we have to have some responsibility around that, because I'm not sure that anyone who uses Turntable.fm in Facebook and has a good time being a DJ and sharing their DJ work in there really understands what the social engagement, loyalty, and gamification all wrapped up in one big package means. I think you just have a good time messing around with music in Turntable.fm, and that's fine. So really, what we're going to discuss around that is responsibility. I think we honed in on money and responsibility for this panel on many sides, but I want to also discuss musicians and their responsibility in a sort of a post-label digital world. Are they defining a strategy? Like, no complaining, there's lots you can do. What is your strategy? And by the way, Facebook and Twitter and all these tools are tactical. I just want to really dig into strategy. And then for the fans, there's a paradox of choice, as David and I were talking just this morning. If you use Spotify and you enjoy using Spotify, then you have access to millions of songs in major label catalogs. Are you okay that that doesn't support musicians or get musicians paid properly? I'm a living example of that, and I'm quite happy to take questions on that anytime. You know, you have to look at how young people consider music these days. It's just disposable. So I'd like to see transparency in Spotify service agreements and things, or actually in their PR. I see it more of a PR play to say we support musicians because when they discover music in Spotify, they will buy those musicians' records or download their MP3s. We know that's not true. There's enough data out there to show that people don't want to own music. They're quite happy having access to music. So why can't we have some transparency from the streaming service companies? And then for music technologists who, as Anthony was saying, are disrupted by nature, it might be about time that they also became honest with their actions. What? Anthony's on the interwebs. You know, there has to be some sort of honesty in what's being attempted and what you're trying to build, but there has to be an understanding of how the music industry works as well. It's like you really got to dig deep and before you start giving young people tools to stream things. And then we'll probably get, this is the end of this rant, by the way, we'll end up in a looking into, say, the responsibility around networks and data plan pricing. Like, you know, what happens when you guys just keep streaming and streaming and streaming and streaming and no one's really looking out for things until AT&T looks out for you and says, hey, you're in the top 5% of all streaming data users, we're going to throttle your plan until next month. I think there is, and I think David would agree, there's a responsibility there from the technologists on their side to look into how much is this going to cost before the $9.99 services I'm using to access all this music that musicians don't really get compensated for. Plus the user has to now make a choice. Do I want to do high-res or low-res downloading and streaming of music, or do I worry about my data plan? We believe that could become a big issue in the future. I'm going to hand it over to, actually no, before I hand it over to David, quickly introduce yourselves.
I'm Jesse Von Doom. I am the co-executive director of a nonprofit called Cash Music. We're building and working on an open and free platform for musicians to use to better promote and sell their music, not intended as a replacement for services that are out there already, but rather as a guarantee that artists will always have access to certain tools and as something that can complement existing services. So.
Rick Moody, novelist, music writer, sometimes musician.
Very good. I've introduced myself for about 10 minutes. David?
I'm David Ewald. I'm creative director of a company in Portland called Uncorked Studios, and we make mobile products.
I'm Roy Christopher. I'm here at UT. Are any other Austin locals here? Awesome. Keep it weird.
I'm Anthony Batt. I'm an entrepreneur, and I run a small company in LA called Catalyst.
So, thanks for the intro and the setup. I'm glad we only have an hour because there's not many topics that you covered there. There's just a few things.
Just a thing.
And I mean, even in the green room, we had probably more discussion than we intended to about all of these topics. And I think responsibility is a big one, where there's responsibility comes down to a number of people. So it's companies, it's users, it's fans, it's musicians, it's a lot of people. And I'm going to kick it off by just asking Rick a question that I asked in the green room, but the quote about gamification is a good example of how language is playing a part in shaping culture, and how the technology, as it evolves, how the responsibility might need to evolve with it. But we talked about language and how it's shaping these things, so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's not a surprise that I find the gamification sentence to be ugly in the extreme. I'm sure everybody out there sort of feels their spine go into some kind of unusual chiropractical situation at the mere sound of the word gamification. And it's not a surprise that the big companies who are sort of at the center of this discussion, the corporations, are extremely adept at bending language to their own needs. That's always the case. Capitalism has the distortion of language at the center of its activity. But what's great about language, and it's what's great about art in general, and about music in general, and about musicians, is that it's really a paradoxical tool. So on the one hand, it can be appropriated by these, you know, gigantic, somewhat autocratic multinationals, but at the same time, it can be appropriated by the user on the street, the end user. So there's always ways back into the subject for us. This is an example. We're sitting here talking about this issue, bringing language to bear on it. So, although it's easy to be incredibly curmudgeonly and almost hopeless about to what extent technology is being controlled by large corporations, and the way in which that becomes an issue for us who try to make or consume music or just enjoy music, there's still always the opportunity for us to bend language and bend the arts to our own needs.
And disruption is a big word that gets used a lot. It's a term that is tossed around in these circles. And I know, Jesse, you had talked about, I don't want to give away too much about what we talked about earlier, but the idea of I know, it's between us. The idea that the big idea, in answering this panel's question, what happened to the big idea of music technology, I think, personally, I think a piece of language that gets attached to that is disruption. And and what we shared in the green room was, I also agree that maybe the big idea is several smaller ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the big idea versus the small ideas.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty vital way to look at it. There's an awful lot of talk about, you know, the new music economy. There's a lot of talk about disruption, and you name it, especially amongst VCs and whatnot. And no one's talking about disruption. They're licensing catalogs. They're working with the same people. All they're doing is injecting a new middleman into a stream of other middlemen. You know, I think that the small idea thing comes into play when you say, what's really vital right now, what's really tricky is that, you know, ask an artist, how do you want to go and sell a download yourself using your own website? It just can't be done. You know, I mean, there's good options like Bandcamp, there's stuff out there for people to use, but saying do it all on your own, you cannot do it. That's just one example, obviously, but it's a pretty simple thing. I mean, it's what, 2012 right now? I mean, come on, it's the future. We're supposed to have that kind of stuff. We have, you know, plenty of other fanciness. Let's go for some of that. So.
Jesse, they promised us jetpacks.
I know. But, you know, hey, we have keyless entry instead. So, but yeah, no, I think that point is exactly one of the things I think is vital right now. It's just making small things that really work and work to help all the people in the chain. You know, there's the artist, there's the listener, and there's nothing wrong with being a company that provides services. Like, I love labels, I even like a lot of tech companies, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but keep it simple, make it work, and make it work for all the people that play. Don't try and revolutionize shit, no one cares, you know?
So do you think, on both sides of that equation, services that are being built and then people who are going to use those services, that actually was two sides of that responsibility coin that we were talking about this morning. What responsibility do you think both sides of that coin play in shaping how they use it, how those tools are defined and how they're used, I guess?
I think we're in the middle of a shift in how we perceive music and how we perceive creativity in general. I think it's important to look at music as sort of a natural resource economy, like you do, you know, logging, wood, whatever. You know, you can, as a consumer, choose to go out and buy low-grade wood, and you don't know where it's from and whatever. You can also go out and make sure that it's a, you know, it's a sustainable forest product and pay a little extra, but know that, you know, you're not an asshole. And that's a solid way to go. And it matters to some consumers and it doesn't to others. I think it's important that we remind people that in the end, music is being created by other humans, by people who are going out and having this creativity and creating art. And if you want more of it, eventually those people have to eat. They have things like bills, all kinds of fancy things that they're trying to get through life with. So, you know, find the models that are responsible, learn a little bit about it, and you know, then it becomes more of an ecosystem, a proper ecosystem, not a single pipeline where you're saying, all right, so we basically buy or license this content from an artist, and then it goes down this sort of messed up trickle-down economics way. I mean, it worked out great for Reagan, but it's really not working out for guys like Dave, whose royalty statements are, you know, very thick, but without a check at the end of them. So, sorry.
Come on, Dave, tell the Lady Gaga fact.
Yeah.
Now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard the Lady Gaga Spotify story. You know, I think it was 1.7 million plays in Europe, and she netted $127. So usually on these panels, I point out what Jesse's alluding to is my post person. In fact, she's a lady, so my post lady delivers these giant packages to my house every quarter that are made up of less than 0.01 cent per track. And at the end of there's always a check, or there should be a check, I should say. There used to be a check. Because all the streaming services are now sort of, you know, they're hogging the sort of music listening area for my back catalog. Sales are tiny. So I used to get really nice checks for radio play and all that good stuff, but now it's all streaming services. Yeah, I get, the last one was $17 for God knows how many thousands of plays of Gang of Four back catalog, and because it was under $25, it had a big red rubber stamp like "Do not pay." It's fabulous.
Below the threshold.
That was below the threshold. Yeah. $25 is the threshold. So 17, and then at some point I'll get 4 times $17, and there'll be a check. I'm not complaining. I'm not an internet curmudgeon. In fact, most of my life now has been lived deeply on the web since about 1993, and the possibilities are endless. And I think what I was saying about earlier on is, like, you know, the responsibility of the musician. When I've written about the end of the container, for instance, you know, you don't have to play within the rules anymore. So I always use Radiohead as an example of pretty much releasing in rainbows on YouTube one New Year's Eve by just filming themselves rehearsing or playing in their studio in Oxfordshire, and you got in rainbows if you want. It's still there, it's still up on YouTube. They didn't have to wait till it was pressed to CD or pressed to vinyl, or it was even before they decided they knew how they wanted to release it. I don't see why all musicians don't do that, but there still seems to be this scramble to, for every new musician, especially new bands, I just want to sign to the label system and sign away all their copyrights. Once you sign away all your copyrights, you have no idea what money changed hands with turntable.fm, for instance. I'm sure Gang of Four songs are available in turntable.fm, and people are having a good time mixing and DJing with them. But I have no idea of the flow of money, where it went, where it goes. It doesn't seem to come to me, that's for sure.
So what responsibility, I'm going to turn to Roy, take it over here. What responsibility do people who are using any of these services have to know the financial models behind them?
See, this is where I don't know.
Can you gamify that?
No. I don't know. I agree that there's a lot of responsibility on, you know, labels and listeners to, if you want to support artists, if that's something that you want to be responsible for, to find those things out and to use the services that support the artist. But it's also up to the artist to make stuff that people actually want and do want to support in the first place. So that there's a lot of artist responsibility here as well. And Radiohead is a good example, but it's also I'm not picking on this. It's a tired example because they were already famous. So they did do something very special, but they were also already famous, and people already wanted what they did because they do make great records. And I think the better example there is like what Odd Future and Tyler have done.
Yeah.
Because they were not famous, and they spent a year just giving away records and making these crazy videos and all this stuff. And then before any of them even had a deal, they were on Jimmy Fallon because they created something that people actually wanted to have. So.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, part of what I understand of Billy Corgan's panel yesterday was he was trying to find a way to have fans engage, and one of his big ideas was, you know, if we like Billy's music or any other artist's music and they're working outside the label system, is we must, he was demanding that we must share all of his highfalutin tweets, and that's a good way to reach people and make them engage with you. But a better way of doing that is to be Radiohead or even Tyler and don't do anything except put out really great music.
Yeah,
really great music, Billy. That's all we want from you. Stop ranting.
If you want
and it'll work.
be engaging.
Be engaging by putting out really great music.
Right. Just to play devil's advocate, Billy Corgan and Tyler, they also make a lot of statements that are pretty controversial. I mean, I would say that without massive misogyny, Odd Future wouldn't be where they are.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I agree.
really,
I agree.
there's also the whole just be a jerk, and that'll help you out.
Well, yeah, maybe Billy being a jerk yesterday is going to help him sell more records. That's great. But
We were
I'm more
talking about
interested in more positive stuff.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of those stories too, and I do think that the internet's a great thing. I think we should talk about it as a very exciting thing for creators. I just, you know, there's ways to get press that are positive and less so.
Is Billy still here? Dave wants to fight him.
We got a question.
I would like to play advocate or devil's advocate to the statement, just play really great music. I've seen many bands who had amazing music and they failed because in today's market, there are so many voices out there that if you are not good at using the social service, social engagement, Facebook, all of that, Twitter, if you're not smart about those things, I'll bet dollars to donuts your band is going to fail. I don't care how good you are, because you must be good at marketing. You must be.
Well, two things. I don't want to answer that right now. I mean, I'm going to hand it to Rick, actually, as from a sort of music critic perspective, if you don't mind. But for the social thing, we'll get into that also, because I'm not convinced that that's the case. Anyway, Rick.
I'm not totally convinced it's the case either, although I think you're throwing me to the wolves right now.
Well, that's what I came
for. I think part of the fact of the matter is that the popular song no longer unifies in the way it did earlier in its career. We have all these tiny little markets now and kind of infinite fractal subdivision of the genres. So there's never going to be a band like the Rolling Stones or the Beatles again, you know, or maybe what's her name? Adele is the closest we're going to get to the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, and partly that's because now that we can really finely tune delivering the music to particular demographics, nobody reaches across their group in the same way anymore, or so it seems to me. So how you define success becomes really slippery. So when you say a band can't be successful unless they're effective in the social media, I want to say, what does successful mean to you? Can the band still play a fucking great set at a club in Austin and have, you know, 150 people standing screaming for more and not sell a bunch of records? Absolutely, they can. That can be one fate for a band. But I remember John Lydon giving an interview during Public Image Days and saying, our cause will be lost, and that's not so bad. And I think about that line all the time.
Very good.
And I'm curious what Anthony thinks about this particular question, knowing that your company Panelist does similar things using social web and all of that for brands.
I think the gentleman's right. I think that, you know, depending on what measure success that he's talking about, I think the more active you are online and the more touch points you have with your audience and the more you can share, I think the probability for maybe financial success increases. I think you still need to be, you know, really entertaining to the audience that you're trying to please. But you know, I certainly think that social is the way a lot of young people communicate, and therefore, you know, using that effectively is smart. And you know, so I kind of agree with them.
There's also the concept of DIY has taken over a little bit too strongly in some ways. it's nothing wrong with getting help, you know, and that's where there's companies like Panelist that do it. There's still these things called record labels that do a great job of it sometimes, you know, and there's nothing evil or wrong about that. Having a support structure, if it's a manager, if it's a company that can help you out with campaigns, or if it's a label, that goes a long way.
1 second, we'll get that. My last thought, yeah, I'll take the question in a second. My last thought, though, is about being great. It's still, it's basically what's your strategy as a musician? You know, what do you want to achieve? What is that level of success that you want to achieve? And then everything else is tactical. And that's not changed. I talk about this a lot. There's nothing new in digital. You always have to market yourself. Like Gang of Four had to hit the road in a van with all our equipment that we unloaded every night into Motel 6 hotel rooms, you know, in a bad part of Philadelphia. We didn't even have record deals. We just toured and toured. Nobody played us on the radio. There was no MTV. We did it, we got a record deal, and then we relied on Warner Brothers to market and support us as best they could. If that's changed now, it just means the band has to do that, marketing and support themselves. So therefore, social tools great, but they're just tactics. What's the strategy? That's what I'm interested in. What's the next question?
Hello? Hi. Yeah, just referring back, there's so many changes into the music business paradigm, from the old methods to labels, record recordings, agents. It is constantly in a shift now. That is the constant. It's moving. You're asking a lot from musicians to know how to market themselves in that shift. And I think the education is our biggest problem as musicians, trying to get not only brilliant music across, but have the platform in which to get to the point where you can create great music. And that's the difficulty, shifting constantly. There's got to be a better education process that goes to the musicians that are spending their time trying to make music and not market. They're not the business side, they're creative side. And that's what I think really, as an industry, we need to extend out some help to define what those parameters, what are those options. And I'd love to find out, as far as the technology, how do these brilliant bands and individuals express themselves without the burden of being taken advantage of?
So I think a number of things. I think it depends on what you define as the industry. So I think there's an awful lot of tech that has happened independent of the music industry, that the music industry sees maybe, what has been known as the music industry and sees. And I think to Jesse's point, that there's nothing wrong with using tools if you know how and why you want to use them. Yeah, and I think I was writing down about tweets and how we looked at the summary of Billy Corgan's talk was through a series of tweets. So that you know, there's little snippets that become the sum total of what it was. And in the same way, I think record labels in the past, however many years, have been just, you know, they're the bad guys all the time. So it's an either or, black and white type of a thing. And I think that's problematic. But I also think it's because nobody has been defining goals properly and understanding how and why. So I think implicit in your question is the idea that people have to take their own destiny and be DIY type of marketing and using social and all of the tools that are out there. But I also think that there's nothing wrong with using a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I don't know. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think marketing has really changed that much. I think Dave's right. It's just a tactic. I mean, if anything, marketing your band or your product has become so much easier that everyone's interconnected. I think that if you were marketing your band 20 years ago, you'd be essentially doing the same thing, except you'd be using different tactics. So I think the notion of marketing hasn't changed. I think the tactics have, and I think for bands, there's just so many outlets to be covered in, and to also sort of go direct to your fan. So I challenge you on, like, you know, it's becoming more difficult. I think it's becoming simpler, and essentially easier.
And again, we don't, you know, Brian Eno used the metaphor of whale blubber, talking about records and the fact that that's one of the things that was shifting into the labels, or losing kind of what they had that was of value. And this is the other thing, is when we talk about value. I value music. I'm up here as a music fan, but you also have to remember, we don't owe anyone a living. Yeah. Like, you know, you were sounding kind of whiny about hauling all the the equipment, but you're doing exactly what you wanted to do, and it's not like anybody owed you anything.
Whiny?
You know what I'm saying? So there is also implicit in that is, you know, the fact that you're, just because you play music, you're owed a living, and that we don't owe you a living.
And also, I think, just to wrap this one up, we were talking in the green room about the sort of the platforms, and I think Rick had mentioned it actually, how some of the bands who are doing best in a new digital world are using, you know, they're creating music starting with the platform, and then I think Roy had said, you know, you can then push it straight up to SoundCloud, for instance. You know, you can make music and push it out immediately, then hit it into social, and then back that up with some great performances, for instance, and just keep going. And I agree, I mean, I've said this a lot on panels, is like, I just got lucky, you know, Gang of Four formed, we were in university, we played to the university crowd in our social area, and we took off really rapidly, but that's just good luck. You know, it's a mixture of talent and good luck. We were good at what we did, but it didn't mean there weren't another 100 bands in Leeds at the time who were just as good. Some door opened that we were able to get through, and we got through it. There's another question at the very back. The very back here. She was first.
I was going to ask, thinking about Rick and thinking about, you know, you're talking about band's responsibilities, and I'm thinking about one of the things that we've lost in all of this, everyone has a voice, is we have many fewer voices that are like music journalists, that are really established and step above sort of like the local blogger, the person who's listened for 20 minutes. And I just wondered if you guys would think about, you know, Jesse talked a little bit about middlemen, and I feel like weird things have happened in the sort of writing and thinking about music.
That's a problem in criticism generally.
You don't mind if I start?
No, please do. That's a problem in criticism generally, and it's not just music criticism. I mean, you see the dwindling book review pages in the major newspapers, et cetera, et cetera. The place that stuff is migrated to is obviously the web in many cases, but because the generation who's most efficient and most taken by the web applauds a 500-word limit by and large, you are not exactly getting a lot of review space in that medium. I, for one, write music reviews on the web, and my pieces start at 5,000 words. So if you have a band and you want a 10,000-word essay on them, I'm your man. See me after the panel, as long as they're good.
And by the way, you mentioned bloggers in there as if that's a bad thing. I think there's been there's a decent democratization actually, that if you go to certain music blogs and other media blogs, there's some great stuff out there, and I find myself moving in between to and fro. I think the Facebook WAG, you commented on my post. No, you didn't. You posted.
That other guy commented. It wasn't me.
Yeah,
I love you, Dave.
No, but you brought him down well. I thought it's just like, you know, oh, you must be in literature or something. But
oh, the editor comment.
The editor comment. Yes, I can't edit myself, but I can't afford an editor either. So I just write nice screeds. People read them. There's another question in the room, I think. Yeah. Oh no, I'm sorry. There's somebody just before you. Then we'll come back to you.
There's been a lot of discussion about sort of the behavioral side of working with technology, but I actually have a technological audience. I deal with developers and that kind of thing. So do you guys need anything for the technological side? Is there something that needs to be developed further to help out with this, or is it just a matter of trying to learn how to use what's out there?
So I think Dave is looking at me because I also work with developers, so I'm definitely much more on the tech side of things. But I think the question is actually more posed to you as a musician and perhaps as a fan. So I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to hand it to Roy. As a fan, is there anything that you need? And that's a fair question. Like, is there anything that people need that isn't out there, right? Which helps define goals and helps define what it is. And I think that's part of the ceiling that a lot of what we are running into here, where there's only so much attention that you can give to one thing, namely music, and there's only 24 hours in a day. And I think that's a real issue.
Yeah, it is a real issue. But as a music fan who's been buying music for 30 years, it's the best now that it's ever been. There's so much stuff, and there's so many different ways to discover it. I think being able to, because I like to support artists. I want to keep art. When I said that we don't owe you a living, I didn't mean that I want to steal it all. I mean so that's the one thing that's missing, is like a good way to pay the artist for what they've done, because it's super easy to get. I mean, it's free. You can get music everywhere, and so much of it, and so many different kinds of it. And I can spend 3 years on one genre and never run out of stuff to listen to. So, but there's not a really good way for me, if I really do like an artist, I buy their T-shirts and I go to the shows, and but I don't really want to give Amazon or Apple any more of my money. I don't know where it's going. You can't. A lot of times you can't find out how much is getting to the artist.
Right.
So yeah, that's what's missing, is like, am I paying the artist?
That's the transparency question.
Yeah,
Right.
but also going to the technology side of that, as an artist myself, I've written at length about the how technologists deliver, like, the tablets from the Mount, new technology to musicians. Like, who the hell contacted any musician about the CD, right? And that's an interesting sort of thought, because the CD is full of ones and zeros. So, in their rush to increase their profits by selling us all our albums again in a new technology, the labels, and I would say the technologists were somewhat innocent in this. They just came up with the fact that you could digitize music and put it onto a shiny disc and then sell that same album to us again, because they're trying to put vinyl out of business. But no technologist ever asked my band, do you need 72 minutes of bandwidth on a new shiny disc?
Would you know what to say if they did?
Yes.
Or care.
Gang of Four's first album, Entertainment, was 37 minutes long, so there would have been a lot of white space on that disc.
But so I think that's actually the same question, if I'm not mistaken. It's the same question of, if somebody asked you, this is going to get to the Henry Ford quote really quick. I think if you ask a person what they want, they would have asked for faster horses.
Yes.
But as a band who is being directly asked what technology you could use, would you know the answer?
I wouldn't know the answer. I wouldn't know the answer, obviously, for many different reasons, which I won't get into here. But what I would like to have done would be to work with technologists and find different answers, ask different questions. Because it isn't only just one question.
Right.
There's never just one question, and there's never only one solution for music, right? We could spend weeks digging in, and then coming up with the best possible results for music fans as well as musicians themselves. And that's part of my argument today is technologists are busy bringing us more streaming music services. As if, well, not just technologists, but there's this weird delta between the labels here, the venture capitalists here, and say the Spotify type services over here. They only have access to all of the same catalogs. So there's not much differentiation between Spotify and Mog and Audio and you name it, Pandora. But what I'm concerned about is the technology hasn't done anything to really expose more people to music. They were already exposed to it in different ways. But what I would argue is it's certainly created the world's biggest arena for listening, well, not listening, because it's created background music. Like, I work in a huge open plan space in Portland, Oregon, and we have a Spotify account, I think. But I play a game every afternoon now and again, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Meet somebody in the kitchen for a cup of coffee and go, hey, what have you been listening to today? And they look at you like you're, what stupid question's that? Spotify's been on. I said, yeah, but what did you listen to? And they don't know one single song that's been played all day long. And now we get back into data bandwidth and data pricing plans. If you're doing that on mobile, I think Dave and I play Mixcloud all the way to the U of O, and it's a 222-mile round trip, right?
Yeah.
So I go down there, as Dave does on Thursdays, and I plug in my iPhone, I open Mixcloud with all my playlist in it, and I must be one of their best users. I'm just there 2 hours each way. It's a 4-hour trip. And they're pushing ads to me, which is meant to help pay for the service, mobile ads. But this thing's sitting in the glove box.
I want to
I don't see any ads. So they're the push ad technology to make money thing
Right.
That makes
doesn't
you
work
one
on
of their
me.
worst users, not best users.
What?
That makes you one of their worst users, not best users.
I want to be their worst user.
I want to ask Jesse the same or a similar question. As a developer or a company that works with developers, who I think you're trying to work with musicians to ask different questions, right? Yeah, and
we've taken a very slow approach to how we built our platform, our tools, everything. It's been
Actually, you know what? We just for transparency,
yeah.
I'm on the board of Jesse's Cash Music operation, as is Anthony, and we don't really want to use this panel to pimp it, but it's worth discussing. That's just to be fair.
I was just going to say that the thing that we've done, the way we've tried to do it is not asking the question, what technology do you need, but rather, what problems are you having, and how can we work together and figure it out? And it's, see, to date, in the last 4 years, we've done something on a range of 160 plus projects, working with everyone from truly young and independent artists all the way up to people who are known, labels different size, managers, you name it. And it's been about asking those questions every time, saying, what are the problems you're having? What can we do to fix it? What is it? And it wasn't until probably about 6 months, probably when Maggie Vale took over as co-ED with me, and we sort of looked at all the stuff in front of us in every project and what had happened, that we saw, okay, this is the shape of things that we're building. And you know, I'll shut up and just say that we work with an organization called Mozilla Firefox, and I think that's an important thing in that it was a light bulb moment for us a bit when we realized that Firefox being released, their mission, Mozilla's as an organization, is to keep the web open for users, to make sure that it's the best possible for users of the internet. And we have a very similar take on the idea of artist sustainability and doing the best thing for artists possible online. Firefox certainly didn't hurt Chrome, and certainly didn't hurt Internet Explorer in that they went away. It just made everyone focus on standards and focus on new ideas and innovation, and that's really what the key thing is for developers too, is to listen to the problems and to find innovative solutions and help other businesses build on top of those things and truly innovate. So,
I want to make sure I know I haven't forgotten your question either.
I wanted to come back to the statement about possibly it's easier to market nowadays because of the tools that are available. I think actually it's harder to market, even though there are great tools available. There's so much white noise out there. So many bands, you know, in their living room put together a demo and throw it out there. And so there's so much white noise out there. And it comes back to my statement that I think what's missing, what's the next big idea? The next big idea to me is that bands just need to wise up about how important it is to use these tools correctly. And to be, I'm still gonna argue with you, you've got to be good at marketing today to be a good, to turn your great music and to put it out to the masses. It's so important. I've seen so many bands, like they put up a Facebook page and they put up another page, and what happens is that they don't do the following steps and engage their audience and create great campaigns. So.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and I think that you also have to be really lucky. I mean, so you know, I mean, you got to market really hard, and you have to become lucky. And I think with every brand or anyone marketing, you still need that lucky break. I don't think anyone's really disagreeing with you on that you have to market. You know, I don't think that's a big idea. I think that's like the status quo.
Is there something even to the idea, though, that marketing itself could be a series of small ideas? So, kind of behind some of your questions, I guess, are this big light bulb moment when we've made it. We've done it, we've marketed well, and we're successful. And I don't know, well, I know there are a few moments like that, but I think that's the luck, right?
Yeah.
But I think,
you know, I don't know what the lucky break is for everyone, but, you know, David mentioned one, but I mean, you know, you're right, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of noise for everybody, and you have to be persistent, and you have to work really hard. It's the same for technology companies. There's a bazillion new startups, but at some point there's an inflection point. It's usually a lucky point, and at that point you take advantage of that. So yeah, I think you need to market, but I don't think that's the big idea. I think anyone that has a product or service needs to market, period.
Would you call what Odd Future has done marketing?
Yeah, that's marketing.
Would they call it?
They wouldn't call it.
Right.
No, they
Yeah,
wouldn't.
but they're producing content.
They
I mean,
would.
like
See, I
skateboard,
think-
that whole culture of skateboard culture is
They
putting
would
out
say-
their own entertainment, which is like people rocking curbs. That they've been putting out forever. They use that same methodology, and whether they call that marketing or producing entertainment, it's the same. Marketing and entertainment are really, frankly, the same. So they know who their audience is, and they're putting out stuff. And so it's not a big idea. Making it easier. It was really hard to actually put out VHS cassettes of skateboard videos. So you had to make them and send them and ship them, all that kind of stuff. Now you can drop an hour's worth of video on YouTube and be on every mobile handset on the planet Earth, and every, frankly, almost a real good sized population of TVs, and every computer. So that's historic. And in Facebook, if you have several thousand friends, on average you have 80. On average, people on Facebook have about 80 friends. So if you're hitting several thousand people that have 80 friends, that network is very big, very quickly.
I was just going to say, I've sort of been sitting here mulling over the question of what is it that we would like to have, that the guy asked earlier with respect to developers, and thinking that, and trying to analyze whether there's a common theme in all the, for lack of a better word, complaints that we've raised today about technology and music and so on. And it seems to me that almost in every case, one thing that's missing is education and a sort of wide distribution of opportunities for people who are involved in every stage of this enterprise to fully understand and know what's happening. And it's true for the bands who might want to market themselves, but it's also true at this really incidental level, which is the thing in America that was first to go when education started really getting crunched in the state budgets was music education. It's been eliminated in many cases. So we're trying to make this form right now where the audience that's coming up, who might consume it, doesn't have any idea, how an octave works or what 1-4-5 means or anything. So at every stage, there's an opportunity for big technology to increase the pool of available information and to market that instead of just marketing their little commodity fetish thing that they do, and perhaps education creates a real opportunity for the next big thing, such that we're all better informed at whatever spot we enter this debate.
Great point. Very good. We have a question over there.
I'm wondering if the big idea is coming from the other side of the equation, and the amount of children and young teens that are coming up that have an expectation of free. They have music on video, on MTV, on YouTube, on Vimeo, and people like us who are saying, $5 an album for digital download. For them, their big idea is, I don't pay for music. For them, it's an investment to pay to Spotify. And I think that while we're finding over the 20s, 30s, and 40-year-olds, they're going to die out soon. Or they're not going to have a pension, or they're not going to have a job, they have to buy milk instead of buying Dave's Greatest Hits albums. No offense, Dave, it is a good choice. But the people who are coming up, who are going to be having the money, they don't pay. Their big idea is music is free, art is free, it's just left at that. And I'd love to see what the panel think that the impact that is going to have 5, 10, 20 years down the line.
So Dave, this morning when we were prepping for the panel, and so I have a 3-year-old, and I know Dave is probably sick of hearing me talk about my 3-year-old, but using him as that exact example, my son doesn't understand a world where Sesame Street isn't readily available at all times on any device that he wants, whatever it is. And that freaks me out for those exact reasons. And I think that a lot of what we're talking about, and there's business models, and there's streaming services and all these things wrapped into this. I think that there maybe is like another 5-10 years worth of that. And all of a sudden, my son will come up and just not comprehend the idea of ownership at all. And so I think we'll probably need to have this panel in 5 to 10 years to redefine what the big idea is again. if we've defined anything today.
Well, I think it's important too. You talk about ownership, and I completely agree. My kids prove it too. Every kid does.
Yeah.
But there's sort of this idea too between ownership and also support. I think you're right that people don't want to pay, and they think that it's free, and they don't really care about ownership, to Dave's point. But they do care about supporting artists. I have heard that time and time again, and that comes from teens on up. I mean, you name it. The idea of supporting a creator is actually something they're really passionate about. So part of that is also the creator saying, you can support me by X, Y, or Z, and if that's going to a show, buying a piece of merch, whatever it might be. And I think that you're right, that they will sort of give the answer of whatever is the next big thing. It will definitely come from youth.
Can I, actually, I was just sitting here thinking, I totally agree with this as an issue. I also think there's a sort of anyone above 30, very tactile, you know, I still buy books, for God's sake, and yet I've got tons of devices I could download them to and read them, but I like books. I like Rick's books. He sends them to me.
Plug.
You see, he sends me free stuff.
I have a new book out.
Yeah, there's a new book coming out. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what I realized, I don't know about anyone else on the panel. I think Roy's childless and Anthony's kids are younger than mine. I actually have 3 kids who are now 18, 20, and 22. It's been an interesting laboratory in my house. They've never owned music. I think the last CD that was purchased in our house was Britney Spears for my youngest daughter because she just liked Britney Spears and she wanted a CD and was massively disappointed that beyond the singles there was nothing there. But that's a whole nother story. But what they do, recent activity has been, Dad, get me into Sasquatch, you know, because I know some people. And so I can help them get into Sasquatch. But when they're there, they buy everything. Like, they have music from the bands who are performing on their mobile devices. And I don't know how they have it, and I'm not asking. But when they get there, they spend hundreds of dollars on merchandise. I'm not joking. Like band t-shirts, band anything.
Their dollars or yours?
Their dollars, Jesse. I've worked it out.
It's important for the money.
He only has the $17.
I mean, they have all my dollars. So it's just like, yeah, exactly. I show them my royalty statements and they leave me alone. But you know, it's an interesting conundrum, and I think Dave's right. We'll have to come back in 10 years and see what's happened, because what do you do now if you turn this on its head and say, okay, we've got to start charging for everything and make sure musicians, not just musicians, but anyone in media that's disrupted by the internet and all these services, how do we get them paid? It's not going to come through charging people who want to download music or download books and all this good stuff, you know, like trying to ramp that fee up, because that'll just push them back to torrents, you know, like the film industry is terrified of torrents, and the music industry has been terrified of it. It's all below the radar. At least at the moment, everything's above the radar, and that's what we're kind of talking about, is what's available to us today. But I also think that perhaps we should bear in mind, we're getting towards the end of this now, just bear in mind that
3 minutes.
This wasn't meant to be, I mean, perhaps having big idea in the title of the talk today is not the best words we could have used, or I could have used. It's not necessarily about a big idea. We might not need one, but we certainly need to keep debating how we're going to keep creators creating if there's no income stream anymore. I mean, that's a bit of a doomsday scenario, but there's no way you can keep doing it.
Is it?
Well, I was just going to say, unless, you know, younger bands, young people, you know, something I talk about in my work often to clients is like, just remember, when you want me to sort of build that thing for you, a digital advertising thing, is more people upload their own silly videos to YouTube every single second than will ever download your thing that's advertising and marketing. So we're in a strange space. We have to help creators keep creating somehow.
We're out of time. I was going to ask a rabbit hole question.
Please do.
No, I think we're out of time. Are we kicked out of this room?
Are we out now?
Now you've got about 2 more
Go
minutes.
what?
2 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
So
I really did want to mention this.
You do?
Well, no,
Yeah.
I do.
Okay,
I
go for it.
mean, very briefly.
Roy has a point.
Well, I was just going to say that's marketing, but I wouldn't call it entertainment.
No, it's not.
I wanted to preface what you were about to say by saying
I'm not going to say it now.
You're not going to say
If you can do it in 2 minutes.
Hands up in the room though, this could be interesting. CSAC, who is aware of CSAC? And, right, so you know what they do, right?
No.
You don't know what they do? Well, this won't help you.
Spend your money.
So they're spending your money, which is interesting. Oh look, we got some mobile images up. Is that you?
That's me.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's okay. So this morning, so basically CSAC, which is a non-profit, just like BMI and ASCAP, and I use PRS in London, who collects my performance royalties around the world, and I get checks for that. Because things like licensing to TV and movies and all that good stuff. But you know, this morning I went to get coffee and I discovered this thing on the coffee cup. And then there's this thing, it's a door hanger. And this is all at the Hilton Hotel where we're staying. And it dawned on me, this is expensive, really expensive stuff. Never mind that, never mind the cost, but it's got a Microsoft tag. We were trying to work out, we got our QR code readers out. It's asking people to do this. And this is another problem in digital, actually, just generally, is when you're asking people to do something in digital, there has to be a huge reward. So when you put up your silly dog poo video on YouTube, there's a reward, and it doesn't ask much of you, and people laugh and share it, and you might go viral. Now this thing it took us how long? Do you want to explain the path that drove us nuts?
Well, I'm aware of the time, so I'll go quick, but you can't use your normal QR code reader. You have to download the Microsoft Tag reader, which I'm sure was part of the whole deal. You download the thing, you work to scan first the coffee cup, but the coffee cup doesn't work, so then you try the hangover tag a couple times, and then eventually you get to the CSAC website.
What was the reward?
The reward was to say, here's some shows that we know about already.
It was crap, that's why they're pointing it out.
Yeah, it's crap, yeah. No, okay, this is not a criticism of CSAC. What it is a criticism of creeping digitalism. Yeah. Creeping digitalism is my new phrase. I just thought of that. Someone tweet that immediately.
I think it's part of, it falls into the line of, we all know we have to do something.
Yes.
A brand has to market, right? And you all know that QR codes are a thing. And the Microsoft tag maybe is a different thing. But this costs a lot of money, and I'm sure Microsoft paid for it in some capacity. But
I don't see where the value is for musicians, and CSAC isn't a musician's outfit. You know, they're gathering royalties for us here, there, and everywhere, but spending their money this way.
And that's just it. Is like, what was the goal of that?
Yeah, what was the strategy? Because they just sent us to a bunch of bands playing on 6th Street. We didn't know that was happening, right? But it took 20 minutes to find that out, and we had to download stuff to our mobile phones, and so, not good.
I think we're out of time. Right, we're out of time. Thanks, everybody.